Oh, why did I do that? All right, and let me just check this because I don't want to do this without audio. One of you guys talk.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Cool. All right, everything. Grab a cozy drink, even a glass of wine, and join us here at the soon to be named book club. As usual, I'm Ian, your hostess with the mostest. With us always, we have book club mom, and with us 90% of the time, we have art illustrations.
Hello.
And with us 20%, or not with us, 80% of the time, Decal is busy tonight, being in a, we're assuming.
We'll see her next year.
Yeah, we'll see exactly. Oh man. We are concluding our lovely little swath of the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. It's been a whirlwind. And the ending was just as crazy. I guess we'll wait for, oh, there she is.
Sorry. My roommate's cat is in my room and he doesn't want to leave even though it's his dinner time. He's just sitting there. So I was trying to get him to leave before we actually started, but I just might have to get up again when he finally decides he wants to leave.
He wants to join book club.
Yeah, he wants to be a part of book club today.
Oh, that's funny. So, in a sentence or less, how would you describe this sentence or this sentence? This sentence, this section.
Wow. Oh my God. What the heck? Every single one of those.
Yeah, I think it just sums it up. I was just gonna, with how I just ended my notes this week was, or how I ended the book too, basically was, um, I just said Patricia is a badass. And then I added at the end of the thing, a badass mom. Not just a badass mom.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what it was all about.
Yeah.
Mothers protecting their loved ones, especially their children.
Yeah. This section was wild though. Like, I can't believe all the stuff that happened.
Yeah, this one's insane. For sure.
And I feel like it was definitely like gorier than the rest of the book. For sure.
For sure. Yeah, I dressed for
That
the
caught me
occasion.
off guard.
I made sure to wear red. I was like, I have to.
I didn't get the memo about the red, so
Sorry.
uh,
So I don't. I mean, we can. Yeah, we'll kind of go through a summary, but we can just. It's the end of the book, so we can just kind of just talk too.
yeah.
So there was a lot going on in this last section. Like,
Because we started at chapter 35, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, before any of the ending even was in motion, that's where we ended. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah. So we end off last week with James Harris in Corey's room doing whatever. And Patricia,
Yep.
of course, freaks out. And, she then we start this section. So basically, Patricia, of course, is freaking out and she's trying to get James off of her, which is way harder than I expected. I was like, what? I was like, you just got him in the head. Why was he just still there?
Yeah.
Um, and then it was, of course, like a little battle between them two. And then like a whole bunch of commotion. That was the description itself, just on that. I was like, look. And then of course it gets worse, like not worse, but
Mhm.
worse as gorier as we get on this section.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We find out that it's not his like first offense doing this with Corey. We um I don't know what that note means. But James definitely like James is trying to be manipulative, basically. He tries to spin it on her and is like, "You asked for this. This is what you
Yep.
wanted." I'm like, "James, how much do you think you can get away?" I'm like, "I don't." I'm like, "What's your end game here?" Um and then yeah, so that whole night, she's taking care of Corey, making sure like it's just a normal day. And she's trying to hold it together, which I don't think any of that would be hard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then, of course, James calls her multiple times during the day. And I was like, James, what are you doing? I'm like, this guy is relentless, I swear.
Because he just
And
wants to try to like explain it away and gaslight Patricia into believing that she didn't see what she saw.
I know. And no, it wasn't even that. It was like, oh, there's a reason behind it and it's normal. I'm like, James.
No, this is not normal.
Nope.
I know. I love that whole it's a condition. I was like, condition.
Yeah,
It's like
right.
dialysis. Okay, Mr. James Harris. You can,
Yeah, right.
No.
It's a more
No.
natural dialysis. I'm like, what?
No.
I was like, James,
You're a vampire.
you can fool the men, but you got to try a little bit harder with these women. Like, what the heck are you
Really.
doing?
He thinks he can get away with it because he's gotten away with it for 400
Clearly,
years.
clearly. And so we come to find out that really what James is after with his unquenchable thirst, as she keeps not alluding to, but like bringing back to with how Miss Mary said in earlier sections. We find out he wants a family. I was like, what? It's like, okay.
Yeah, he just wants to steal her family and her.
Right. Yeah, right.
Which,
And
like,
just
Carter is not great at all. Like, Carter is, in fact, like scum of the earth kind of thing. But, like,
Mhm.
James Harris is not any better.
yeah. No. Absolutely not. And so from and then at the very end of that chapter, it's revealed that basically James Harris knows what they were planning or what they were trying to plan. He's like,
Right.
oh, the
Yeah.
weirdest thing happened. I just found Francine's license in my car.
Mhm.
Ugh.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, I was like, oh boy. I was like, so what's gonna happen now? And
Right.
basically that's what we get. What we get into is that basically Slick calls together the old book club because Patricia, and I mean, of course, Slick knew that that was the only way to get everyone into a room.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Because Slick, we haven't really discussed her. She's been basically, I would say, raped by James Harris, and she's extremely ill. She's hospitalized, and we really don't know her future until we read the end of this book.
well, yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, no. So of course, I mean, yeah, I remember what was it, 2 weeks ago now since we took a little break.
Right.
um,
Mhm.
2 weeks ago,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that
there
was
was that whole thing where, they thought it was AIDS and it was a whole ordeal surrounding, I mean, not only just for her, but literally
Yeah.
everyone else. And of course,
Right.
these men are just trash.
Yes.
Just,
Mhm.
anyway. So yeah, so we don't know Slick's fate. And of course, we're hoping that if James Harris is disposed of, she'll get better. Um, but yeah, so we get into the hospital room,
Mhm.
Patricia's pleading her case. Grace is still there. Grace was about to leave, but she ended up staying. And then we get the whole like Grace versus Mrs. Green like in the hospital room. And we see Grace flustered probably
Yeah.
for the first time in this book. And of course, even Patricia's like, I think that was the first time she was taken aback ever.
Yeah, I have to say, Mrs. Green to me in this whole book is really the unsung hero
Oh, for
because
sure.
she is so pivotal in so many of the important things that happen in this book. It's really very interesting to me that he created this character who's so strong and so ready to fight. I think it's just really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it goes along too with like it doesn't matter where you come from or where you live or even
Right.
what race you are. Like if you're a mother or if you're a parent or like it like I think that's kind of like one of the main themes of this book that like these moms are all not appreciated enough, but in reality they would literally do anything to save their children. So I think yeah, I think at least to me, I think that's like an overarching theme. And I think Mrs. Green is definitely one of the people who has not given up over the course of this entire book because she doesn't have any other choice.
Right.
Like she had to send her kids away,
Yes.
and as hard as life has been for Patricia and all the other book club moms, like they
Yes.
still had their kids with them.
Right.
Yeah, so I think he does a really good job of humanizing all of his characters and really getting you to empathize with all of them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I mean he's great in like still making it into a complete story, but putting in like I guess it would be like social issues, like things that you would like even just in regular life you'd forget about. Like you're reading it, like a normal suburbia essentially, and like you forget about all these little things that really just make up everything as a whole. So I think that was really good of him too. Um, so yeah, so I think Slick's speech after Grace leaves, I really
Yeah.
that was super powerful, of course, just to convince everyone that they have to join. But I really love the little line of "There's nothing nice about Southern ladies."
Right.
I was like, yeah, he definitely doesn't know who he's messing with.
Yeah.
So of course we find out that everyone's in with the plan, except of course Grace, who just stormed out. And then we're alluded to what they're thinking of how Patricia's just like, well, I guess I gotta give him me. I was like, what? And before we just jump into the very end and just kind of go like for a free for all, because there's really, I don't know, like the summary of the big stuff is just gonna kind of drag. So basically, a chapter before we get into it, or like get into Patricia going over to James Harris's house and everything, and just so Corey is sent to a rehab facilitation because Patricia
drug addiction.
Yeah, because Patricia told Carter it was drugs, and then of course Carter's immediate response was, "Well, she gets this from your side of the family." I'm like, Carter, you're such a
he is such
word.
an asshole.
Yeah. Unbelievable. I'm like, this man.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
And I love the response Patricia has in her head to that, because she's just like, no, they just murdered a man and buried him in the backyard. Because it's like going back to the story of when James Harris first showed up around Miss Mary and like the rest of Carter's family and convinced them it was someone else, and they freaking killed him and buried him in the backyard. So yeah, your family's just as trash. Like you suck just as much, Carter. Oh
yeah. He's something else. I was like,
I'm only smiling because I'm happy about what happened.
Yeah, what we get to the end, yeah. And then so Carter, of course, goes off to the game, and Patricia's like, "Yeah, I'll just stay here." And I just loved the description of her getting into her dress for that night.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was like, we all have outfits like that. I was like that.
You're
Mhm.
funny.
Yeah, I was like reading from the moment I read like Patricia starting to get ready to like until she like got to James Harris's, and then even like when everyone else showed up at James Harris's, like I was sick. Like my stomach was turning the whole time. But it was so hard because like I was also enjoying reading it because like the way that he just describes it, like that paragraph on 358 where she's like talking about her eyeliner and her eyebrow pencil and like blush and like he's like describing every teeny tiny little bit of her getting ready and you can just feel like the nerves building. And yeah, he's just like really good at suspenseful writing, so it was like I'm like sick to my stomach but like I want to keep reading because the way he writes it is like just pulls you in so well.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, you're in the story every step of the way with him.
Yeah.
You're
Mhm.
submerged as much as you don't want to be as we get to these other parts.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I think the like one of the parts that had this much suspense, like almost this much suspense, was when they were in his house and found Francine's body. Like
right.
Mhm.
that part was like, oh my God, I'm sick to my stomach, but I'm on the edge of my seat. Like this is written so well. And I feel like from this moment until the end of the book is just like that, like the whole way until we get like the resolution in the last couple chapters.
Mhm.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, you didn't know what was happening at any moment because it was
No.
just so chaotic and so unpredictable. But it was so fun to read.
Hmm.
Well, then it looks like, you felt like nothing was going to happen because it looked like James just laughed at Patricia, right? And
Oh
her,
yeah, at the very beginning.
whatever she was thinking, yeah, that's what he's telling her,
Hmm.
that, there's nothing you can do to me, she just laughed at her and, made fun of her. And uh,
Oh,
yeah, it was really, um, so lowering for poor Patricia, but she ended up being victorious, so that's the best part.
hmm.
Right. Yeah, no, he
Because yeah,
definitely did
James,
a sorry, what?
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say James definitely loves his little power trip in this section. Like you can definitely
Yes.
see his real personality come out. Um, and
Mhm.
just how cocky he is for sure. Like I was definitely like I was surprised at the laugh. Like I was like, I guess okay, fine. I guess you could have seen this coming if you really thought about it. Fine, James Harris.
Hmm.
But I definitely was like, there's more to the story, James, and you're overlooking the rest of these moms. Like, and that's the
Yeah,
plan. Like that's the plan.
Right.
Like
that's the
you
plan.
messed up.
Hmm.
But it definitely was I guess it was like I was like, well, there's three other women, of course. So like they've got to do something. But just how Patricia broke down, I was like, oof. I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen now. I was like, great.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like on page 361 like I hate James Harris. He's the worst. Like but when he starts going into his rant and he's like, "Well, you'll just take anyone at face value as long as he's white and has money." And
Hmm.
I was like, there it is. Like that's almost kind of what I was waiting for because I felt like throughout this whole book there was just like that underlying race storyline that was happening where it
Mhm.
was like, well, no, like no one's caring about the kids on 6 Mile, like everyone abandoned Miss Green kind of thing. Like, and
Yeah.
it wasn't really addressed in the book at all. So I was kind of like, this makes so much sense, but it also just feels weird that it's like not addressed. And then James gets on his little high horse and goes into this rant, and he's like, I mean, he basically just proves it right that he really was just preying on people who are like too close-minded in their little world. Like Patricia didn't think twice about him at first because like he said, he was white and he had money, and then he like kept bringing in money to everyone, and like yeah, so like that was wild that he like just totally told her off, because I was not expecting him to be like, this was my plan all along. And then he did, and then it also sort of kind of resolved some of that conflict that I was just having like with myself with reading. And like I have really enjoyed the book, but I was just so unsure of like why he, like, the author wasn't addressing how race was playing into it until now. And then James goes on to say like that he tried basically to get Patricia to kill herself.
Right.
And the way that he's just like, but an artist is only as good as his materials. I was like, no, I hate you. You're the worst. Absolutely not. We do not support this. Like,
yeah, that was a lot. I was like, James, I'm like, oh, I'm like, I can't wait to see what's coming. I'm like, oh my God.
So patronizing. It's so disgusting.
Yeah, that was that was a little hard to read. At some points I was like, geez, I'm like, I'm surprised you just like straight up try to kill him then. Like,
right.
Damn.
Yeah. Some of this was very difficult to read for sure.
Yeah. And then of course it ends just with the feeling when James, like, well, first it's like he's like, you don't want to watch this, and Patricia's like, no, I do. And then she's like in her monologues like, no, I didn't. I was right. But we find out that it's, you know, it's the greatest pain followed by the greatest pleasure. So simply intoxicating is what James Harris is doing to these people, essentially. And then we jump. Patricia is MIA at this point. Like, she's knocked out. She's not coming back for a hot minute. And at one point, we didn't know if she was coming back at all.
Right.
I was like, ooh. I was like, what's going on?
Right.
But then we switched to Kitty, Mary Ellen's, and Mrs. Green's point of view. And I wanted to ask, who would you be when you were walking up to the house? Which mom?
Oh my God.
Would you be Kitty talking about Christmas presents? Mary Ellen just kind of being like, what? And Mrs. Green who's like, get your shit together.
Right, really.
I have a feeling that I would probably be Kitty. Like, I have a feeling that I would just be trying to like break the silence and the tension and like the fear with like humor.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
I'd like to think I'd be Mrs. Green, but you never know.
Right. I'd say the same thing. I'd like to think I'd be Mrs. Green, but I'd probably end up being like useless Mary Ellen.
who turned out to be pretty useful.
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah.
Which is cool because it's like, I liked the way that he wrote that, where it was like every mom was useful at some point.
Right.
Like,
everybody stepped up.
Yeah, everybody had a job.
At the beginning, though, I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
Crap.
It was touch and go.
Yeah. It wasn't even touch and go. It was almost go. I was like, what's going on?
True.
Oh, but yeah, so basically we can just jump in. I don't I have a couple like quotes and other things that I liked out of it, but yeah, so there's the details in this, like, next, we'll just say three chapters. Impeccable. I was like, everything had something new that I was like, I didn't need to know that, but thank you. I mean, but honestly, if it wasn't part of the story, it would be probably just so weird. Like, it needed to be like everything that was detailed out. It was like appropriate. But how did we feel about the whole situation? Like, did we think the moms were gonna win? Did we think James Harris was like gonna get away, or was he gonna win? Like, what was all of our feelings until, of course, we got to the resolutions?
Well, I really didn't think that they were going to win because so in the beginning of the book, if you remember, he's like says he has an author's note, and at the end of the author's note he says, as you'll see, it's not a fair fight. So I like all this time that like every plan they've tried against James Harris hasn't worked. Like I was just expecting this one to not work. Like I really was rooting for them because I was like, what's going to happen if they can't get rid of him? Like I was like, how is, and also like there's only this much left of the book. So
Right.
like what's gonna happen if they
Mhm.
don't win? But also I don't really see them winning. So I was definitely like, and I had no idea how they were gonna try and like dispose of his body either. And like so that surprised me. Like I think this whole chapter um was just really shocking altogether because like I just
Oh, yeah.
and he wrote it really well to where he kind of makes you believe that they're not gonna win.
Right. Well, I remember doing the author, bio on him, and it just stuck with me that I believe from the get-go, because I read about him beforehand. He wrote this book in honor of his mother, and all the Southern women who are always thought to be these dainty, polite, charming, quiet women who don't have backbone. And he said that is not the case at all. And here, this is an homage or homage to these women who really brought him up, and uh, who really helped him understand women. That's what I have to say about it. I think he really did a beautiful job, and he paid a great tribute to not only his mom, but all these other women who are, part of his life. I'm sure they all became characters in his book in one way or another. And so I was pretty sure the moms were going to succeed. And of course, as a mom, I'm going to be pulling for other moms.
Yeah, I was nervous there for a second. I was like, "Oh, he's writing that they're losing." I'm like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "This isn't what's supposed to happen." But like
Yeah.
but also like even I was just thinking about this actually right now. Like even if we go on the alternate timeline where James Harris like wins, like what the heck is he gonna do with all the moms? Like you can't just kill them off.
Yeah.
Right. Mhm.
So that would have
Yeah.
been
I was like,
interesting.
of course I really wanted them to win, but I was
Yeah.
just he was doing such a good job writing it where it was like I couldn't see them winning, and then I couldn't see the book resolving itself in like only 20 or so pages or however much it was.
Right. Hmm.
So yeah, I was definitely I would say caught off guard by like this whole ending for
Mhm.
sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I love the line when Kitty finally like well, I loved I loved the description of Kitty swinging the bat. That was
Mm,
fantastic.
Mhm.
definitely.
And just how
Mm,
Kitty took charge when she was like the most
right.
nervous one. It was great.
Yeah.
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 And then
Yeah,
Yeah.
of
she
She
was the
course,
one that
started.
ended up
She
stabbing him
started the
and getting
revolution.
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And then of course Kitty's the one who took him down.
Yeah, she's
And
the
Yeah.
one
like
that paralyzed him with the knife.
yeah. So that was also intense. Just reading that, I was like, oh my
Yeah.
god! Just reading the knife going in the back. I was like, I didn't
Yeah.
need this today. I was like, ugh.
Yeah, and that's why I was like my jaw was on the floor because I was like, we haven't had this like much element of like
Mhm.
gore
Right,
in this book yet. I mean, maybe like Slick's attack was like a little bit gory, like so was like Miss Mary's and Patricia's and stuff, but I feel like this and it makes sense too because it's the end of the book, like it's the final
right.
big action scene, so like obviously it's going to be like the goriest one, but I was just like, "Oh my god." Like I did not need to know that that's like I did not need to know that the knife went all the way through James Harris and touched the dial.
Yeah, exactly. I loved Kitty's line though in this when yeah, yeah, you know what
I
I'm
was
talking.
just gonna say that.
Go ahead, you can do the honors.
When James Harris gurgles, "You bitches haven't even slowed me down." Kitty says, "Why is it always bitches?"
Mhm.
Yeah, I
As if
love
men
that.
believe that that word has some kind of magic power.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was something
That was
earlier
great.
with that too, when like the
Yes,
past, the other
that's right.
sections we read.
In the
Yeah,
beginning, right?
yeah,
Yes, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah, it was
And like
just
even when
crazy.
this chapter ended and they were like, now comes the hard part, I was like, the hard part? I was like, what are you gonna do? Like
yeah. No, I
and
know.
I was
Yeah, I
just
was
as
like, it was
shocked.
the hard part. I was like, oh boy. I was like, what does this mean now?
Yep.
Um,
Like I thought for sure they were gonna stuff him in the cooler, but then I realized that the cooler was just there to carry all of their weapons that
yeah,
they intended to dismember his body with.
Right.
yeah,
Yuck.
I know. But on that note, we're gonna take a little baby break. Mainly because we have to, but it's fine.
Well,
So
I think that's the perfect time for our intermission because we've
yeah,
got just the end left.
yeah. So I think yeah. So we'll take a couple minute break. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, and welcome back from our short little break. Just a quick little reminder, we are now finishing our discussion on the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. It's been a wild ride, and it's sad it's ending, but also it was super exciting.
Yeah.
So just picking up where we left off. So yeah, so we're getting to the hard part, which we're like, I feel like overpowering James was the hard part, but I get it. Right. So then we're getting into the dismembering of James Harris, and of course, he's just kind of lying there. So of course they go check on Patricia, which I was like, oh my gosh, is she dead? I was like,
Yeah.
don't be dead. And of course James is like, she's a goner. Don't worry about her. Like, blah blah blah.
He's just still trying to talk his way out of it. Like he thinks he can talk his way out of it and
Not
convince.
at that point though. I don't think he was even talking his way out of it. He was just so cocky that everything was
Yeah.
going to plan because he was like, well, I'm going to heal and then I'm going to overpower you again. Like,
He didn't know what they were gonna do.
right.
So he was like, well, yeah, of course Patricia's gonna die or whatever,
Right.
Yep.
Again, the personalities of the moms with Patricia, absolutely hilarious on some level.
Mrs. Green is the one that knows how to do CPR. Kitty's just
Right.
like,
What?
Right. Yeah, Mary Ellen's like, what are you doing, Kitty? And Kitty's like, I just saw it on TV. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
yeah.
Oh.
Ah.
But I absolutely loved that moment in the book where James is like actually shocked and taken aback about what's about to happen.
Yeah.
I was like, and then his tone and his whole thing changes. I was like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Like-
was definitely one of my favorite, just like stick it to him. Definitely.
Well, because that also like let us know what the moms were gonna do. Like,
right.
and that was when we first learned that, and I was like, oh my god, they're literally gonna dismember him like Dexter. And
right.
just like, well, and then James Harris, of course, gets scared, and then that's when he starts like still trying to act calm and talk himself out of it. But he's like, oh shit, like I can't defend myself, and
Yep.
he's not healing fast enough, and he still has the knife in him, so he's just like, you can't do this, you can't do this, and he like says anything he can to get them to stop.
Right, yeah, I love the bargaining of the immortality and everything else. I'm like, James, you deserved every single bit of this.
And like he kind of like he gets Kitty to stop for a second, and then that's another moment where Mrs. Green comes in as like the hero
leader.
of the story. It's like, it's
not
okay.
even a leader, the hero. You're right, the hero.
She's like, I got it. Like, keep an eye on Patricia, because and when I read that too, I was thinking, I was like, of course Mrs. Green feels this way because she's probably got like all of the rage and the sorrow from like all of the kids that have been disappearing across 6 Mile for years.
Exactly.
So she's like, no, I'm not gonna stop. And so
Right.
I'm glad that like I'm glad that they all didn't give up. And then after Mrs. Green was like, no, we're gonna do this, like Mary Ellen just shows up in the bathroom and helps Mrs. Green.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that they took the pages from the hunting book as
Right.
a guideline of what to do.
Exactly.
Yup. Taped him on the bathroom wall.
Yeah. Amazing.
Mhm.
And then, of course, before Mrs. Green. Oh no, that was
Oh.
as they're getting to the very end of dismembering him.
The doorbell rings.
Well, not even that. I was gonna say I
Oh.
liked Mrs. Green's little like this whole section. Like the moms got all their little jabs in. Like he wrote it
Mhm.
so well with like just how they've been treated the whole book. It was just fantastic. So of course,
Yeah.
Kitty with the bitches comment, and then Mrs. Green with the, I'm glad I can take his head off. Hopefully he'll stop talking because we sure know
Yeah.
men like to talk. And I'm like,
Mhm.
um, yeah. So yeah, they're finally they dismember him. They put the pennies in it, or was it? It wasn't really.
Nails.
Yeah, they put the nickels in his eyes according to Miss Mary's legend, and
Right.
then
Well,
of
I
course
think they were just like 20-cent nails. So I think like because that's how I read. So I think they were just like really hefty, like
Mhm.
long, large nails.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think they were too. That bit was confusing just because I'm not a.
It was. I'm Googling it because I want to see
Okay.
what they are.
Right. 2 thick 20-penny nails into each of his eyes.
Yeah, they're just like really long and thick nails.
Okay,
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Like this is how big they look compared to like a human hand.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, those guys. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Because that tripped me up for a second too. I was like 20-penny nails, and then I was like, this has got to be like what they used to be called in the 90s. Because then I
Right.
remember
They
it was the
probably
90s.
stacked 20 pennies, and that's how tall it is. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, this has got to be something like that. I was like, and so then I just pictured like very large nails.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair. And then so
Uh-huh.
and so they realize they step away from their artwork, and they realize
Right.
that there's blood everywhere. And of course, they don't have much time, and they're starting to freak
Right.
out. And then, of course, the doorbell rings after they realize that James Harris is still squirming, dismembered in these bags.
In the bags.
And so
Yeah.
the nails didn't do anything.
Yeah, and I also like I love the way that like at first I was a little confused why James Harris was like talking about the Wide Smiles Club or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this? There's barely any left of the book. Like,
Mhm.
what's gonna happen? And then when I finished reading, I was like, okay, this makes sense. He was really just pulling anything out of his ass to get them to stop. Like
Exactly.
to get them to stop killing him, basically.
Right.
And obviously everything he said had no merit at all.
Oh, right. Who did we initially think was at the door? I thought it was Blue.
You thought it was Blue?
I did. Because they were so close, and I was like, that would be what would happen right now. Like, Patricia is like up there, and Blue is coming to see James Harris because he got bored of the game or something, and like, whatever. Yeah.
Wow.
No, I definitely thought it was Blue. Just an initial thought.
I think like I thought it was maybe some of the husbands or something, like maybe coming and looking for him, like, hey, why are you not at the game? But I didn't have any other like thoughts as to who it was. I thought like maybe police because someone had heard something, but like I didn't I didn't know who it would have been, but I also didn't think that it was Grace.
Right.
I think I secretly hoped it would be Grace because the book club had to succeed, and without her, they weren't going to. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that it was her that showed up, and really, again, here's another person that showed at the right time and was the right person to finish the job here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Again, here's Mrs. Green going to clean after she just went through all this trauma.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I'm like, holy moly, this woman, and this woman's probably 10 or 15 years older than these book club moms. You know what I
Oh.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Maybe not, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, I don't think they really ever gave her age.
No, because really she probably wasn't, because she had high school,
Right. Yeah, she had children that were
so she's probably similar age. Just she had a much harder life than these other women.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right.
So,
Yeah, you definitely see Mrs. Green as like the mom of the group.
yes, for sure, for sure. Yep.
Yeah, so basically, just everyone just played a part. Like all of the
Yep.
book club had to be there for this to work, essentially.
And I
Um,
love that as soon as Grace showed up, she started calling the shots and like whipping
Yep.
everybody back into shape and
right.
getting everybody back on board, because everyone was like losing their minds, because they were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? There's blood everywhere. Someone's at the door. Like, we can't finish this. Like, and then Grace shows up and Grace is like, nope, we're finishing this.
Right. Well, I
Yep.
mean, they wouldn't have a place for James Harris's body if it wasn't for her either. Because their
For
initial
Grace?
plan, yeah, for if Grace didn't show up, because their initial plan was to get him cremated, but they couldn't cremate him if he was still squirming. And
Yeah.
Grace had the cemetery. I was like, what do I call them in my? When I was writing, I was like, what do I call them? I put them
Plots.
as but they're like
Yeah, they're like internment
Crips.
crits.
Yeah, they're
kind
like-
of thing. Because like they just get, they're like, yeah.
Yep. So
Yep.
she donated her and her husband's 2 crypts right to the
Right.
Yeah.
cause. Mhm.
Yeah, and then another little quote just from Grace. When they called and was like, oh, how's the like it's the the deed is done. James Harris is in the boxes. How is the cleaning going? Do you need us to come over? And Grace was just like, or no, it was before they left or something. But Grace at one point said, we've been cleaning up after men our entire lives. We'll be fine. I think that was right before
Yeah.
they left, actually.
It was like right before they left, and
Yeah.
it was like, okay, you, Mary Ellen, you and Kitty go take him to Sturs and put him in the like internment plots or whatever, and then we'll get to work. And yeah, then she says, don't be absurd. Mrs. Green and I will stay behind. We've been cleaning up after men our entire lives. This is no different. And I was like, yes.
Right.
And then I just love that little blip between Mrs. Green and Grace.
I know, I was
when
just gonna
they're talking
say
about
that.
how they're gonna clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
Mrs. Green's like, I prefer ammonia. And Grace is like, hot water? And Mrs. Green's like, no, cold. And then they're just like, interesting. And then they just clean.
Right. Like there wasn't a murder that just occurred here.
Right?
Yeah.
And then
right.
it's also like weirdly like this moment where it's like they both have 2 completely different lives, yet somehow they sort of are connecting over the fact that they can both clean really, really well.
This is common ground.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's their common ground.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I just love the whole dynamic of that book club. I was like, but that would be me, like with my friends too. Like we just randomly start talking about whatever in the middle of a murder, for sure.
And then the
Right.
way when Mary Ellen and Kitty call and
Yeah.
Mrs. Green is like, oh, Mrs. Kavanaugh is just ironing the sheets. And I was like,
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, just casually.
mhm.
And
But they
again,
obviously did a really good job.
Yeah, really. And then but on page 389, the discussion between Grace and Mrs. Green before they part
Right.
ways, right?
Yeah.
Grace, Grace says, "Thank you for all your help." And Mrs. Green says, "Tomorrow I'm going to drive up to Irmo and bring my babies home." Grace says, "Good." And Mrs. Green says, "You were wrong 3 years ago. You were wrong and you were a coward and people died." And then it says, "They stood considering each other in the glow of the car's ceiling light as the engine idled. Finally, Grace said something she'd almost never said before in her life. I'm sorry." Mrs. Green gave a small nod. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said. "We couldn't have done it alone." "None of us could have done this alone," Grace said. So, again, a very almost simple, right? Conversation between these two women, but so impactful.
Yeah. I think humbling too is a good word for that
Yeah.
whole situation.
Definitely. Yeah.
Because Mrs. Green is not wrong, and I'm glad that she said that to Grace, because I think Grace really needed to hear that,
Yes.
because everyone gave up. Even
Yeah.
even Patricia in some ways, like that
Yes.
3 years prior, everyone gave up
Yep.
because it was the easiest option.
Right.
Right. And then so Grace, of course, sticks out with Patricia, which I was like, oh, Grace coming to the rescue. I was like, thank God.
Yeah. Right. Grace takes Patricia to her house to, recover.
Recover.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I
And
love
even reads her In Cold Blood.
Yes.
I was just gonna say that. I love the way that they just bring it back to the book club.
Yep.
Right. What was this? I forgot what this, because In Cold Blood was the very last book.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so this one was supposedly Clear and Present Day. Oh wait, no, that one's too far back. 1 second.
Yeah. That's how we started, wasn't it? Clear and Present Danger. Almost.
No, we started in Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus.
Oh.
3.
No, the start was
In
Cry.
Cold Blood is the very, very last.
Oh, at the very beginning,
chapter.
you're saying. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I thought it was interesting that they were alluding to like their next book essentially, or like the next, like, because Clear and Present Danger is the very last
You're right.
section in this whole book.
Yeah,
that
that's
was my
right.
point. Sorry.
Gotcha.
But the In Cold Blood was brought up throughout the whole last like 5 chapters of the book, of the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus section. But yeah, how did we? So we get to the last, chapter right before the last one, and it starts off with, now we're in Patricia's point of view again. So she's in a daze, and she's like, I thought it was interesting that he brought it back to like a point we were never going to read about, where he was like, even in her old age, she could forget this, and this, but she never forgot this. And so I thought that was interesting that he took it in that direction.
Yeah, I had to read that paragraph a couple times because I was like, whoa, did we just do a time jump? Is she like super, super old? And then once I kept reading, I realized like what he had done. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, it's one of the memories that's stuck with her because, and I loved the way she was like, you had to love your son so much to come back from hell to warn him. And then she was like, no, Miss Mary didn't come back to warn Carter. She came back and she warned me.
Right.
Because Patricia was more like a child to Miss Mary than Carter was at the end of Miss Mary's life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, definitely.
Like Patricia took way better
I like
care of
that
her.
little.
She was caring for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Carter could care less.
Yeah,
Right.
he really didn't care.
Yep.
Yeah, how did we, I mean, for the most, like, how do we feel about the Miss Mary interaction? Did we think it added to the whole I guess, story? Did it give us a part of our? Oh my gosh, I just had the word. We use it all the time when we get to ends of books. Not
Resolution?
resolution. What?
I said resolution?
I guess it would be resolution. Yeah. Was it part of like a resolution? The Miss Mary.
Yeah. To me, I really liked it because I feel like Miss Mary was kind of like a present part of the story even after she died, because
Mhm.
Patricia had that moment where she got the warning from her ghost. So I liked that. Sorry.
That's-
I liked that he's like, even though this is the second to last chapter, I like that he's ending it with like basically Miss Mary came back and was like comforting Patricia and was kind of just felt like a pat on the back, like good job Patricia, like you did it, like we couldn't even do it when James Harris was around the first time, kind of thing. So I thought it was a really nice thing to add into the end.
Well, and again, Miss Mary is a mother, so it plays through the whole theme of mothers in this book, and I think she played a very important role in recognizing that this James Harris was a problem. She had the photograph. She died this horrific death with the rats, and oh my God, that was just another horrible scene, and I just think it really added to the whole theme of moms, overcoming, this evil.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah, no, I really liked. I mean, I think it added, of course, to the story.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a nice little like a. Missing my word I want, but anyway.
Yeah.
And then after that, of course, she wakes up. She's completely clear of mind. She's hungry. Who wouldn't be after all that?
Really.
And then, of course, Carter rushes in and is like, "Where's James Harris? Where's James Harris? Where's James Harris?"
Cares more about where James Harris
Oh
is
my
and
gosh,
his
that was
money
so
than he does about
annoying.
his wife and his daughter.
Right. I was like, Carter, what?
Yeah, what a jerk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the worst. And I hate the way that he's just like, he tells Grace, like, I appreciate you being here, but I'd like some privacy with my wife. Like, no, you don't deserve privacy with your wife.
Right.
Yeah. And then, of course, this whole chapter is just a chapter of resolutions. Like, everything comes together in this last chapter.
Right.
So she just is like, I want a divorce.
Yep. I like cheered for Patricia when it was like, Carter, I want a divorce. Like, it's about damn time. You should have divorced him 3 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Like, this man has not appreciated you for so much longer than just the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, he's basically just been manipulating you and controlling you and trying to like not trusting Patricia's instincts and trying to just make her small. And I was just like, nope. Bye, Carter. See ya.
Yeah.
And then it just kept getting better.
Well, for that part, yes.
Worse for Carter. But I was so happy that he was finally getting what he deserved.
Oh yeah. No, I was happy she realized that he's not worth her time. Especially after all this. Like, he didn't do crap. And he just was part of the problem more than anything else.
He was, yeah.
Right.
And then of course we get into the two characters like passing away. So we have Slick that ended up passing and ended up changing her will to be cremated because she was worried about I want to call it a hatchling, basically, because that's the way she worded it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that
I was kind of thinking that she was just gonna end up turning into a vampire like James Harris. That's that's kind of like how I read it, and that's like why I think she wanted to be cremated. But that's another question that I have too, because she's like, do they still bury cremated remains? Because like Slick had like a plot in the cemetery, and like Patricia walks to it. So, but then James Harris is in the crypt. So did they cremate James Harris, and like did they still cremate James Harris and then just seal him in the crypt, or did they just seal him?
They just sealed
Okay.
him.
Two different crypts, right? His head was in one, and then his body parts were in the other. That's what I got from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess
but
that's
they
like
still buried Slick. Yeah.
Yeah.
they
Oh
still
yeah.
buried her after they cremated her. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think if I was gonna guess, it had to be, I don't, the way, because there was that little, like a couple chapters back, there was that little quip from James Harris that was like, oh, there's something special in store for Slick.
Right.
Like I don't
Yes.
like I don't know if that was just her turning. I think there might have been like a baby or a hatchling.
Yeah. That's the next generation of James Harris was
Yeah,
was
was
being
in Slick.
produced or it's being created, right?
Right.
That's
And
what
Okay.
that was what was killing
Yeah.
her, basically.
right. Yes.
Yeah, because it was like seeping all of the nutrients out of her body. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really. Yep.
And so I I love that there was just that little, like the book club was always there. Like
Mhm.
someone was always
Yeah.
there with her. Like they never
Yeah.
strayed away from their promise. Like it all comes back to the book club. Like I thought that was just so sweet and wholesome.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then of course he hits us with another one right after that with Ragtag, the dog,
Yeah.
like just getting a brain tumor and passing. And I was like, why?
Well,
I'm like, we didn't need to add that.
right. 'Cause even the dog was a hero because he helped save Miss Mary and Mrs. Green from all the rats.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that was sad and surprising that Ragtag died, but
yeah,
I
but it
almost
helped bring her kids and her together.
Yeah.
yeah, I
that
almost
is
kind of
true.
expected it to like yeah. I almost kind of expected it to happen because he was an old dog already.
Mhm.
So as soon as they said it was a tumor, I was like, "Oh no, the dog's gonna die too."
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
But I love that like she didn't fight Blue when Blue was like, "No, we need to get Corey. Like
Right.
Corey needs to be here." And then Corey and Blue just sort of took care of Ragtag like right until the very end.
Yeah, exactly. And then the big surprise that Carter is, telling the kids, "Oh, you're gonna have to live with your mom, who's like not gonna get anything. Good luck to you, Patricia.
Right.
Yeah, I'll be living in the house, and you can live with me, or you can live with your mom." And they both choose Patricia. So yay for
Yep.
her.
Yeah, that was great. But I was
And
like,
I
Carter, what the
Yeah. Again.
Oh my
what
God.
a dick. I
Idiot
was
are
like,
you?
are you serious?
Right.
Yeah, that just made me hate Carter so
Yes.
much more. The way he was just so mean
So
and
petty.
so rude to Patricia in
Right.
front of the kids. And then they both were just like, "No, we want to live with mom." And I think they both finally
Right.
kind of realized that despite everything that had happened, their mom was the one who was making sure they were taken care of all this time.
Right.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
So Carter deserves that.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And then
And I got confused because I thought that was the end of the book because I forgot that we had these little black pages. And I was like, okay, like if that's the end, that's fine. And then I turned the page and I was like, oh, thank God it's not the end.
Yep.
That's funny. I can't remember where. I don't know if it was in this chapter or the chapter before, but Grace and hers interaction with, my mom, with Grace being like, my mom always said to keep like money for myself set aside just in case.
Yep.
And there was that whole
Exactly.
wholesome thing too. Like the book club. Yeah, this book club's just solid, basically.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for
It's just
sure.
great.
Yep.
I love the way that it like she talked about how she didn't know how much money Carter sunk into Gracious K, but she
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
judging by how many times her lawyer had to remind him to pay child support, it was probably a lot. Like
Yep.
good Carter. You deserve it.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And
then we
that how
get
everyone just like didn't care that James Harris was gone. Like they just assumed that he knew what was going to happen with Gracious K and just up and left, and nobody
Mhm.
ever like thought
Yeah.
twice about it because they cleaned the house so well. And I'm like, oh, good God, I feel bad for whatever family moves in there.
Yeah,
right. But yeah, no,
Uh,
I mean they were right. No one went looking for him. Nobody
Yeah.
cared.
No one came after them.
I don't know why this sparked this little memory, but there was a whole moment where Patricia kind of realized, I think it was earlier in this section, but Patricia realized like James Harris was literally trying to take it was before she went to go see him, that she literally was trying to take everything from him. She took the house that she loved. She took, basically his or her husband and her kids, and now, he wants the rest. I'm like, yeeks.
Yeah.
Ugh.
The sweaters though that Slick
Oh my gosh, that was so
gave to everyone. Oh
Yeah.
my God. So tacky and so funny. And
that was so
Yeah.
And then of course she was like, Grace wore this. And then I think it was Mary Ellen, was like, oh yeah, I have a picture.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that moment happened where they had Christmas dinner with Grace and Bennett and
Oh, that
Grace
was that.
gave-
Yes, that was one.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, and Grace gave her the money, and then it helped her get a new apartment. And
Yeah.
And then so we end the whole book with her going to the cemetery, seeing Slick, which I thought was cute, with putting the book in the wine glass. I was like, oh.
Mhm.
And then that whole moment with her like listening for James Harris, basically.
Yeah.
And just a bunch of like realizations about how I really liked that little blurb where it's like, we weren't stronger than him, we weren't smarter, but like it just was all circumstance that we all came together. And it really, I love that ending of that little paragraph where it was just like, if Kitty never like basically it was like if Kitty never called her over to start a new book club,
Right.
none of this
Yeah.
would have ever happened. What would even happen if that never did? It was just fate in general. I thought that was so like cool. Cool of her to put it in her cute.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved that.
I don't know if I mean, in theory he would still be wiggling around. So I don't think she's imagining the wiggle.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's why I brought up did
Yes.
they cremate him and then put him in the crypt? Because like
Because they remember they discussed the fact that they couldn't take these squirming bags to the hospital or the biohazardous waste place because they wouldn't cremate something that was still
moving, yeah.
Right.
vibrating.
Because Mary
So like now
Ellen,
he's just like I mean, hopefully he's just trapped forever in this crypt and
Right.
can't get
Exactly.
out. Like
right. Well, Mary
Yeah.
Ellen works there at the funeral
Right.
home.
Mhm.
So that was
That's
how
right.
they would get it, but she of course doesn't do the cremation. So someone
Right.
they would have to pass it off to someone.
Right.
And if they see
just-
the thing squirming, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Right.
yeah. Yeah, so I feel like that was like a little bit of a loose end, but also there's obviously no way that he can get out because like even if all of his other body parts beside his head put themselves back together or somehow get out of the bags or whatever,
right.
they're not going to actually be able to get out of that little box in the crypt. So like I don't know. I think he's basically good as dead, but
Oh yeah.
he's probably like still he partially conscious or whatever, and maybe that's like the thing is that he's gonna live in that for like all of eternity, still alive and like not being able to escape.
Yeah, that's the hope at least.
Yeah, I guess
Get what he
that's
deserves, most certainly.
Yeah.
So how did we feel about the ending? Either with the ending of just the book in general, or with even the little like Mary. No, it
Right.
wasn't even Mary Ellen.
Mary
It was
Fretwell's.
Mary Fretwell, Marjorie Fretwell,
Oh, Marjorie. Sorry,
Marjorie Fretwell's little
Yeah.
like 1999
Well-
New Year's little blurb. I was like, what was
Newsletter.
that? Newsletter. Yeah. I was
So,
like, what was
so
that?
I read through that too, and I kind of think that that's his acknowledgments. Like, I think that's how he wrote out his acknowledgments. I don't have anything to
That would
support
be
this
cute
theory,
if that was how.
but because he says someone like who's a good librarian and like a grammarian, so I'm assuming that's like an editor. And then like the last couple paragraphs are him just like listing people, like, and then he says a big thank you to the oh well.
Yeah, it might be.
You're right.
You might be right.
Because that says, then Julia Catton and Anne Hendricks, our sisters three, had a lot to say about the killer inside me. So, yeah, definitely was a call out to all the people that helped him write this
Yeah, I
book.
think this was his
Together.
little way of doing the acknowledgments, and I think
Yep.
that was really cute.
So how did we feel about the ending, since we're getting close?
I liked
Okay.
it.
I did. I liked
Yeah.
it too.
I liked the ending too. I think it resolved everything I needed it to resolve. Like, I don't really have any questions. I'm not left wondering about anything. Like, they're just gonna go on living their lives.
Yeah, for sure. How would we how would we rate this book? How would you guys rate it?
I think I'm gonna say 4 out of 5.
Really?
I don't know. 4 out of it's hard.
Well, so
it's-
how I oh man, we're gonna run out of time. So how I'm gonna do how I do the ratings is basically like it's still 1 to 5 stars, and the unicorn book is like an extra.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So I liked it. I don't think it's a unicorn book for me, but I liked it enough to say 5 stars for sure.
5
I
out of
agree.
5.
Yeah.
Five out of 5 for me too.
Yeah. I would totally recommend this to anyone to read this, but I don't know. The ending, it was good. It just didn't cinch me into the like push it in. It just didn't push it into the unicorn book for me.
Yeah. I still really loved it. Like, I would recommend it to everybody to read it, but I think I have to do 4 out of 5 just
Okay.
because I don't know, some of the parts to read were really uncomfortable, like
Yeah.
just the parts
Okay.
with like Corey and Patricia and James
Yeah.
Harris, like, so some of that was like a little uncomfortable to read, but like the book was still so good. So like, in short, that's why I give it 4 out of 5.
That makes sense. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us on this wild ride for the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And thank you to Book Club Mom for being being all through this with me, and Heart Illustrations showing up, of course, when you could. And also thank you to Decal for showing up when she could also, even though we're all have busy lives. So it was great to read this with you all. I'm glad we all enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a great read.
So just very quickly, we'll be reconvening January 5th. So we're going to take a little break to bring a bigger and better book club for you all. So thank you for joining us on this little wild ride for 2022, and we can't wait to see you in 2023. So have a great night, everyone, and see you in a couple weeks.
Bye.